do more in person. Oh, did that just start? Okay.
No,
That was already recording?
no.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna do another brief introduction because we just started recording. So welcome everybody to the first meeting. You'll find these, you'll find these on our YouTube channel. If you're watching the recording of this, you've already figured that out. But Sam will send out the YouTube channel link, so anyone who hasn't seen
It'll
this
be by email.
by email.
Yeah, it'll be UPS.
Yes. All right, so a couple housekeeping things first. Top agents for December. So we'll do this briefly every month. I'm sorry, well, we're not going to do this every week because it's for the month, but we'll do this once a month. Top agents for December. This is based on sales volume of closings. So Julie Karuna. Julie's not on here yet, but yeah, Julie is in the process of getting her condo on the market. So she's a little frazzled right now. I think it's going on the market today.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Yeah, I think
yes.
so.
So Heather Kimes. Heather just actually had her first closing in December, and it was a good one. So Heather was in our top agents. And then Sam Amonette, number 3.
Yay.
So congratulations to the top agents for December. All right, and we have some new agents. So these are all new just really in the past couple weeks. So Tim Bradbury. So Tim is a new agent. He does landscaping as a day job. So he'll be watching this recording, hopefully. Robe Telesa, he should be here soon. I know he's meeting with you afterwards, but Robe just passed his test a few weeks ago. Alex Dodd, who's in, where did we decide? South Carolina is where? Yes. So Alex is out of town, but Alex is coming to us from a Coldwell Banker office. He's a newer agent. And then Nakia Heston. So Kia actually passed her test back in September, but then had a baby like a week later. So wasn't really the best time for her to get started. So she put her license on hold for a few months, but now she's ready to get into it. So I went ahead and put her on here as a new agent. So welcome all the new agents. Okay, and then speaking of Sam, so just for anyone who hasn't met Sam or which probably still a few people.
Yeah, not anyone in this room.
Not anyone in this room, no. Sam, in addition to being one of our new agents, is also our Cap City Professionals admin. So she can do things like load your listings for you. She's going to do some training. She can help you with video editing if you're making videos. I know editing's tough for some of us. All that sort of thing. She keeps the team running smoothly. So just want to make sure everyone knows they can reach out to her. I didn't put her number on here, but I can certainly get that to everybody. Or you can put that in the chat.
Oh, that's right.
Clintonville office updates. So I think I've talked to probably most everybody at this point, maybe individually, to let you know we are going to have a second location soon just for our group. So it's a property that I own on North High Street, right in central Clintonville. So it's getting some, I don't want to say renovations, it's actually in great shape already, but it's getting converted from a house to an office. Most of the conversions actually outside, adding some parking, knocking down a garage, but so that's all going to be happening over the next few months, but really probably as soon as a month from now or less, it's going to be ready inside for anyone who wants to start working out of that office whenever they want. You guys are all going to have access to it. I'll kind of split my time between here and there. We will maintain our office here. Morning, Robe, how are you? You probably don't want to sit there because we're doing back behind you, so sit up here. And I just introduced you a few minutes ago on our recording. Guys, this is Robe. So yeah, so that office will be more or less up and running probably in the next month. The only things that'll be outstanding are, again, more the outside things, replacing a driveway with a small parking lot, that sort of thing. But I would say give it till, mid to late spring, and it'll be a very, very nice looking office. It's going to have, I'm actually going to hire a mural artist to do like murals on the outside, and it's going to be a nice place. So you'll have the option of working there. You'll have the option of working here. So I think it'll work out really well. All right, so now we'll get to kind of the really important stuff. Not that any of that wasn't important, but so I'm gonna give you guys a little background because I'm not sure that everyone even is really up to speed on kind of what's going on in our industry. So this past fall, there were some lawsuits. Well, the lawsuits started a while ago, but they were completed back in October. These were lawsuits in Missouri, and basically they were class action suits against NAR, the National Association of Realtors, as well as all of the top real estate corporations in the United States. So the basis of these class action suits were that sellers were being asked to pay buyer broker commissions, but it wasn't really given to them as an option. Basically, they were kind of more or less forced into paying buyer broker commissions when they had their house listed. And of course, if you guys remember from your classes, antitrust laws say commissions have to be negotiable. There can't be like a set commission, and this was basically considered a violation of antitrust laws. So the lawsuit was lost, again, back in October. And then as soon as that one was lost, then those same attorneys went after the next tier of real estate corporations around America. And that was just in Missouri. So this is going to probably start happening in every state because, again, if it's lost in Missouri, it's going to get probably lost everywhere. So what this is doing is it's changing the way that we do business when it comes to both our listings and working with buyers. So when you go to a listing appointment now, you've got to talk to the seller about the advantages of offering a buyer broker commission, but it can't be just an automatic thing like we've always done in the past. The biggest change, though, is going to be on the buyer side when you're working with a buyer. So we'll go ahead and screen share here. Sam, you want to put that buyer representation agreement up on the screen? So what we're going to go over is the form that's called the exclusive right to represent buyer residential. So this form has been around for 20 years or more in some form. It's changed multiple times since then, but Nancy, I know you used this form before. I have probably in my career, I've only used this maybe 3 times ever. But starting right now, we're going to use this with every single buyer. Why is that? Well, because there are going to be it's already started. There's going to be properties in the MLS that are not offering a buyer broker commission, which before the rule was to put it in the MLS, you had to offer a commission to a buyer broker. You couldn't put it in without a commission to the buyer broker. Now you can because of these lawsuits. So I want you guys to get paid when you're working with a buyer. So this form is what's going to ensure that you get paid. So we're going to go over this today. The other thing that's going to change, though, is when you start working with the buyer, instead of just meeting them at, say, hey, meet me at 4 o'clock at 123 Main Street. You're going to need to do a buyer consultation. You're going to have a meeting with the buyer before you ever start showing them properties. Basically, you're going to kind of treat it like you would a listing presentation. You wouldn't list a house without meeting with the seller and going over all the reasons why you're the agent that they should choose. So you're going to basically do the same thing with a buyer. Now, because I promised to keep this relatively brief, we're not going to do that part of the equation today. We're going to save that for next week. Next week, we're going to go over kind of the flow, the process of a buyer consultation meeting. We're going to go over your value proposition, because that's something that, again, you would do that with the listing. You would tell the seller, here's why you should list with me. Here's all the things I'm going to do for you. You're going to do that with buyers now too, because the buyer broker agreement, buyer representation agreement says if the seller's not paying a commission, you, the buyer, are going to pay the commission. And if we're expecting a buyer to sign this, we better be ready to prove our value. So again, that'll be next week. We'll save that part for next week. But for this week, we're going to go over the document itself, the buyer representation agreement. And it has changed just recently, so even if you've used this before, there are some significant changes on here. All right, so we'll start with number 1. Obviously, and if you look at this form, it really looks very, very similar to the listing contract. It kind of mirrors it. It's very similar in every way. Some people even call this a buyer listing agreement. So section 1, this agreement is by and between. Of course, the buyer's name goes in the first blank. The your name, the agent's name goes in the second blank. You're the broker's appointed agent. So it's saying that you, as the agent, and us as the brokerage, have the sole and exclusive right to represent that buyer in locating real property and to negotiate for its purchase, option, exchange, or lease. So again, same kind of language that's in the listing contract. The buyer acknowledges that the buyer is not currently contracted with another broker for the purchase, lease, or exchange of real property. So this is saying that, you know, they haven't signed this same agreement with another company. They're also saying the buyer does not know of any referral fees that are to be paid on the buyer's behalf by the broker. So they haven't gotten into an agreement with some other agent that says you have to pay a referral fee out. All right, so second section on that, obviously, just like a listing, you've got a start date and an end date. So you're going to put the start date on here. I would say that should be not a date in the future. It should be probably the date that the buyer is going to be signing this. And then as far as how long it should be, the end date. I mean, a listing agreement on a house, most people are probably doing like a 6-month listing. I would say for a buyer, just because it's probably a little harder to find a house, especially once we get into spring, maybe make this a year. I don't see any reason to make it less, but all this is negotiable between you and the buyer for the most part, including the dates. So section 2, appointment of agent. So buyer agrees to the appointment of, and that's again going to be you. It does say on here, buyer agrees to delegate to their agent the authority to appoint other licensees within the brokerage to represent the buyer's interest if their agent is unable to provide buyer agent services at the time and place dictated by the buyer. What that means is if you go on vacation, Nancy, you're the most likely to go on vacation.
I'm going next
So,
week.
yeah, so that means that the buyer is allowing you to assign your buyer to another agent within our group to cover for you while you're on vacation. 3 is just the definition. 4, buyer's obligate or broker's obligations to the buyer. So the broker shall provide to the buyer the fiduciary duties of loyalty, obedience, confidentiality, accounting, and reasonable skill and care. So for you guys that are fresh out of real estate classes, those are all the things that license law requires you to provide. That's the very basics. Obviously, again, next week, we're going to go over all the additional things you're going to do that provide your value to this buyer. The next paragraph there in section 4 is basically saying that the buyer acknowledges that you're working potentially with more than one buyer, and potentially you could even have 2 buyers that you're working with who are interested in the same listing. So they're acknowledging that, you know, that can happen, and in such situations, you're not going to disclose any of this buyer's terms to this buyer and vice versa, which kind of goes without saying. So then there's section 5, the buyer's obligations to you. So it's saying, again, like it said in the first section, the buyer's going to work exclusively with you. If they go through an open house or something like that, they're going to identify themselves as a client of you. For the purchase. So yeah, all offers obviously for the purchase, option, exchange, or leasing of property shall be made through you, the broker. Section 6. So this is an important one. This is kind of why we're doing this in the first place. Sam, you'll have to scroll down on that. It's the top of the second page. So compensation to the broker. So this is where you're going to put the amount that you're going to be paid. Even though commissions can't be set like in a whole community, like every brokerage in Columbus can't get together and say we're all going to charge 3% to buyers. That would be a violation of antitrust laws, but each individual brokerage can absolutely have a policy on their own commission requirements. So Keller Williams Capital Partners wants you to put 3% in here as a minimum, which is what I would recommend as well. So you're gonna put 3% in there. So if you read through this, basically it's going to say that the fee may be satisfied in all or in part by a seller paid commission credited toward the buyer's obligation for compensation. So if the property's in the MLS and the seller's offering a 3% commission, then on that property, the buyer is not going to have to pay you themselves. Your payment's coming from the seller. If a property is in the MLS and it's got a 2% commission, then obviously the buyer would be making up the other 1%. We'll talk about how that's gonna play out, after we go through this.
Hey, Rick, this is
Yeah.
Doug. So am I understanding you that if we sit down with a client and they do not want to pay the 3%
Mhm.
upfront, then our practice with Capital Partners is 3% is the minimum. We go no longer. We let that client go.
Say that last part again?
If the client is not willing to pay the 3% gross commission, and Capital Partner says that's the minimum, and do we let the client walk at this point?
Well, tell me why you would want to do less than 3% with a client, because you'd be getting this signed before you would know if a property has a commission offered or not, because you'd be doing this at your initial consultation.
Right, I don't know. If some of it goes back to Rick, previous conversations that we've had around
Yeah.
my
Any
particular
exceptions,
situation,
any exceptions,
but it,
you would just want to talk to Lori.
okay.
There's exceptions.
So
there.
it is, so if we do get pushback, there is an we go through the document with our client, and then if they still push back or whatever, we can escalate it to Lori to decide on what
Yeah, yeah, like you and I
what
talked
we
about
want to do as an
before,
organization.
yeah, the risk of putting something less than 3% here would be the majority of the properties that you'll be showing this client probably are offering the 3% commission in the MLS. So if you've got 2% here, you're basically just giving away some money right there.
Right.
So that would be
Right.
what I caution you about, is kind of the repercussions of putting less than 3% on here. So,
But the tricky part is you can't say to the client, oh, right now, all of them, most of them, we haven't seen repercussions of this yet. And most of them are still offering the 3%, but there are a chance that they won't. But you have to agree to, Mr. Buyer, you have to agree to the 3% up front, I guess.
There are agents out there that are only offering 2%. I've seen them. And this basically is just saying, our contract is 3%. So let's say if you get 2% from the other agent, that buyer is agreeing to pay the difference, which is 1%. Regardless, I think honestly, you want to put that 3% there because you never know, especially like when the market gets really hot, you can be showing so many houses, and if you negotiate from the beginning a lower percentage, you're not going to get properly compensated. But I do understand that there are going to be buyers, they're going to be hesitant, but you might not want to work with those buyers because you are working.
Have you, Nancy, in the case where they are offering the 2%, in your experience, have you run across where you had the agreement for 3%, the seller side only was paying 2%, so you needed to collect that other 1%?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you've had that.
Absolutely, I have. And the title company, basically you just gotta provide this contract to show the difference and where they'll collect it for you.
And
right, but you didn't get any pushback. You didn't get any pushback from the client or anything.
No, not at all. And as a matter of fact, I also have a contract when I have had buyers that, basically they want to buy investment properties, and I tell them, I have a flat rate, regardless of how much, whether it's $20,000 property, I'm going to charge you a flat rate of $3,000. That's my minimum, and they don't hesitate. Because you're providing a service. As long as you let them know that you're providing them with a service, and I haven't had much
Mhm.
pushback at all, honestly, I have not. Now, I probably will eventually, but as the market starts shifting with this contract, I feel that every buyer is gonna run into the same thing with any other agent. You just gotta sell yourself.
That's a good way to put it.
That's,
Doug, we're also gonna talk about other ways that the commission can get paid without it directly coming out of the buyer's pocket.
mhm,
Okay,
There are gonna be workarounds. So we'll talk about that in a minute too. There's also, Doug, a section at the end, which is kind of, just a blank that can be filled in that we'll go over where you can put, exceptions for, different situations that could potentially come up.
I ran into.
right.
I ran into that, regarding, asking the seller for closing costs. And that way my buyer has the money, instead of bringing the money to closing cost, he's bringing the money to pay me.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and cover that since Nancy brought it up. So one of the things that I think is going to be a common occurrence, when there is a property that's, the listing's not offering compensation to the buyer broker. I think a common thing to do will be to negotiate in your offer. We're gonna put in a clause, just like we always used to, that says, seller to pay 3% of the purchase price toward buyer's closing costs, discount points, prepaid items. So adding that in is basically, if the seller agrees to that, that's going to save the buyer 3% of the purchase price when they come to closing. And then they can use that savings to then pay your commission. So it's still being paid on their behalf, just in a different way than usual.
Mhm.
So I think that's gonna be common. Honestly, my personal prediction, and it's nothing but a prediction, it means nothing at this point, but I think that most good listing agents are going to adequately explain to a seller why it's a benefit to offer a commission to the buyer broker. So I think good listing agents are still going to have the sellers, paying that on the buyer broker's behalf.
Mhm.
So I think the ones that aren't gonna have a commission offered are gonna be the ones where maybe the listing agent isn't good enough at what they do to convince the seller to pay that.
Mhm.
So I think the majority are still going to offer commissions. The other thing is, at this point, this whole lawsuit thing hasn't really gotten out to the public yet. At least that's my perception. Considering how many agents in the business don't even know this is going on, like, I don't feel like the general public is really aware of, the fact that sellers don't have to do this anymore. They never technically had to do it before, but
Mhm.
so I think over time, there are gonna be increasing number of sellers saying, oh, I hear I don't have to pay a buyer broker commission. And I think a good listing agent, though, is gonna say, no, seller, you definitely don't have to, but here's why it's beneficial for you to do that. So I do believe that over time, most still will offer a commission. But you don't wanna get in a situation where your buyer loves the one listing that has 0
Mhm.
offered without having this in place. So that's why this needs to be used every time, starting immediately.
I had one yesterday, actually, I had a conversation with a seller. And, I pulled up comps. And in that neighborhood, you can see that most of the houses were selling within 4 days. There was one house that took 29 days to sell. That house looked in really good shape. But when you look at, I'm like, I don't understand why it would, and when I looked at the commission, it was lower, and I used that to actually tell a seller why. I thought, and he's like, oh no, I'm fine with, paying, the 3%. It was easy, cause you just gotta find those little.
Well, you probably got them a good deal on that house if
Yeah.
they bought it, because it
Yeah.
had been on the market a little longer. and
Exactly, so I,
So that seller kind of screwed themselves by
Exactly.
not offering it. They probably got less on the price, it took
Yeah.
longer to sell.
exactly, so you could use, the information out there to help you also sell it to the seller, why they need to offer proper compensation. So,
And of course, you can't not show a property or send it to your buyer just because it doesn't have a 3% commission on it. That would be a huge license law violation. So it happens, it definitely happens, but you guys shouldn't be doing that. Okay, so what section
One
are
of
we on?
Lori's,
I'm sorry, Doug?
one of Lori's meetings, She indicated that if the seller, or excuse me, if the buyer directs us to not show them the properties that have less than the 3% or whatever that magical number percentage is, that we can do that. We just need to be protected by in these documents that it's a written documentation to us that they've instructed us
Yeah.
not to show them those properties.
I don't know why a buyer would do that, but yes, if a buyer did that, then you would definitely want written documentation of that for sure.
Well,
All right, so, section 7, where did we leave off here? We cover 6 all the way.
Mhm.
Yeah. Section 7, protection period. So for anyone who's seen the exclusive right to sell listing agreement, this is almost word for word the same. I have always used 90 days for the protection. What do you like that in?
I put 120.
Okay, well, 120, whatever. 90, 120, basically the protection period says, if you would, show this buyer a house during your terms of this agreement, and they don't buy it during the agreement, but they go back, a week or a month later, negotiate directly with the seller and buy that house, you're still due a commission because you're the reason that you're the procuring cause. You showed them that house, you sent them that listing during your terms of your agreement.
If they say, you're not paying that.
Well, so that's the thing. The question, if you guys couldn't hear it, is what if the buyer says, I'm not paying it. So like any other agreement, listing agreements, purchase contracts, we are not in a power or in place to have the power to enforce this. So the only way to actually enforce this, if a buyer refuses to pay, would be to go to court. So that's the downside of these is, again, we can't enforce this. So a court would enforce it, but if this is only a few $1,000 commission, you'd probably end up spending half of it in legal fees and
And then you might be losing.
yeah, it's not a good look. Obviously,
Yeah.
you're never going to get referrals from that
That's what-
client. So, you have to think about a big picture. Is it really worth it to go to court, spend the money, the time, the bad vibes that come with it? But yeah, I mean, I think most people are, know that if they've signed a legal document, there's the threat of legal action, they're gonna go ahead and do it. But yes, there's always gonna be a few people who say, I'm not paying it, and we just have to kind of take that case by case then. Okay, so some of the ones farther down are more kind of just clarifying other documents. So the agency disclosure, the company policy on agency, the consumer guide. Again, next week we'll go over kind of the flow of this buyer consultation. But Lori did one recently, and I think she had a really excellent flow to hers. But basically, she started out with the consumer guide, which of course you need that signed up front. So she started out going over the consumer guide, then she went to this agreement here, the buyer representation agreement. So section 8 is just kind of referring to those documents. Disclosures and indemnification, just again, some legal things, kind of basically cover your ass kind of things. Saying that you're not warranting square footage on a property, you're not guaranteeing that the seller has disclosed all property defects. Again, mostly language that's already in, other documents, including the purchase contract. It's also saying that the buyer understands that you're a real estate professional, but you're not an expert in tax, law, finance, and surveying, structural conditions, hazards, hazardous conditions, or engineering. So the buyer should be consulting experts in those fields. Okay, so then on to the third page. You got the fair housing language, which again is already in other documents, but it's just reiterated here. 11, inspections or tests. Same language it's in the purchase contract that we're recommending inspections. Just some miscellaneous things here. I don't think we need to go through all those. Down to page 4. If there's a dispute, again, just like with the purchase contract, it's got the kind of order that things would happen in a dispute situation. The wire fraud language, you can't have that too many places. That's in other documents as well. So Doug, here's your section 17 additional term. So, if you had a buyer who absolutely would not agree to pay 3%, if the seller wasn't paying it, you could have something in here that said, we could work on language, but it could basically say something like, if the seller is offering a 3% commission, then, the company is going to receive that. If the seller is not offering 3%, then you could potentially have the exception here where it's, the 2% or whatever the case may be, but you'd want to
Okay.
language from Lori Molnar. And I still think, almost without exception, there's really just no reason for that. I think, agents who are putting less than 3% in here are the same ones who are probably discounting listings for no reason.
Mhm.
Julie is a great example of this. So Julie, every listing that she's ever had, almost without exception, has been 6%. She just doesn't even offer less than that. I think a lot of agents who are maybe a little less experienced kind of go into a listing offering a lower commission just because they don't feel like they're worth more. So next week, we're going to go over all the reasons why you are worth a 3% commission and not a 2 or 1.5 or whatever. But again, there are exceptions certainly to every rule, and this is no different.
I used to be, afraid to ask for what I was worth. I was
It's
one,
common.
yeah, I was one, and I always felt like someone else was gonna outbid me, and they were gonna, so, not anymore.
And I guess my particular pushback or concern that I've had for my one client is they're a repeat client for me. It's not a new client or somebody I'm going up against in competition for it, but it's somebody that does regular business with me.
Yeah.
And
that
how
would
do
certainly be
you?
an exception, I think.
Yeah,
Because if you were listing properties for someone repeatedly, you may give them that quantity discount,
right.
because they're doing a lot of business with you. So that's certainly understandable. But what you don't want to do is get in a situation where the seller's offering 3 and your agreement says 2 and the, buyer wants.
Then I'm leaving money on the table now.
Yeah. So you'd want some language to cover you in those situations, which I think would be probably the majority of the time, if I had to guess.
But I think with the one piece that as I approach my client now that I can say is if they're not, and it came up in our discussion here, is if they're not doing the 3%, let's say they'll agree to the 3%, we get a buyer that wants, or the seller's only gonna pay us 2%, so kind of come up with that additional 1%. There's other ways that we can write it into the contract so that they do pay for it.
Mhm.
I think that is, for me, having it in my toolbox, well, I won't present it at the day, but when you're going through this, or when I'm going through it, I'm like, okay, there are other ways that I can overcome their objection
Yeah.
in that scenario.
And you can't guarantee that, of course, because that would be negotiable between the buyer and seller. Is the seller willing to pay 3% toward buyer's closing costs so that the buyer can in turn pay your commission? So I think that's
Correct.
a common workaround, but that won't work in every case because the same seller who won't offer a 3% commission to a buyer broker may not be willing to pay buyer closing costs either.
That's true.
So
That's true.
it's a workaround in many cases, but not every case.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so this is all new to all of us, even though this document's been around for years. Very few people, including myself, have used it. So this is kind of new territory for everybody, and we're gonna certainly figure it out. This is not even close to the biggest change our industry has seen since I've been in the business. I remember 15 years ago or whenever it was that, Realtor.com and Zillow started like that. People thought, oh God, now we've like put all of our private information out to the public. There's pictures, there's everything out there. People are gonna say we don't even need an agent now. But here we are 15, 17 years later, whatever it is. And this is not that level of a change. And we got through that one just fine. So we'll be fine on this one too, but I just want to make sure that you guys are extremely well prepared for this. And I know a lot of you that are on Zoom or here in the room with me have already sat through several classes here in the office, training in the office, and are kind of aware of all this. But I know there's a lot of people who had no clue this was going on, so I want to make sure that everyone is aware of it and everyone's really, again, next week, we're gonna work on our value proposition. You're gonna be able to explain to a buyer, here's why I'm worth 3% if the seller won't pay it. And you may not even realize all the things that you do for a buyer, but we're gonna kind of sit down and go over it all, and you're gonna have a really good presentation for a buyer, just like you're gonna have a really good listing presentation. Any questions on this?
I was gonna ask you, so remember that situation with the VRC? I think it's the VRC question on the
The
MLS.
variable rate commission.
Yeah, the variable rate commission, so, also, I would say be on the lookout for that, because sometimes the agent has the variable, rate commission checked off, so basically saying that it can vary. I ran into one where it said on the MLS that they only offered, it's 2%, commission to the buyer's agent. Well, there was a variable rate, commission on that. And, I spoke to the agent, she basically said that she will honor the 3% for me. So you can if it says it's variable, you can negotiate the commission with the listing agent as well, okay?
Now, you can't do that in a purchase contract, though.
No.
That would
So,
have,
Nancy, on that particular one, you had to make the phone call to the agent to find out what the details were behind that variable rate commission?
Yeah, so I kind of lucked out. So on that one, I just basically, I saw the 2%. I talked to my client, I told my client, hey, you're gonna have to pay me $4,000, at closing for the difference of my commission, which he already knew he might more likely have to pay me 3%. So 4,000, though it sounds like a lot of money, it was nothing compared to what he would have.
What,
So-
okay,
I spoke to the agent, we were just casually talking about something, and she said, hey, I just want to make sure that, and this was by text, she goes, I want to make sure that you understand that there was a variable rate, commission on that listing, and I said, well, I got scared for a second. I thought she was gonna tell me it was gonna be less than the 2%. I was like, wait
Right.
a second, it says 2%. And I basically, well, can you elaborate a little bit for me? And she just said, how much do you normally pay a buyer's agent? And I told her, I pay 3%. I don't play with nobody's money. And she said, well, I'll honor that for you. The reason why she had 2% there was because where she's at, it's country, Leesburg. It's like an hour and a half. Most of the agents over there try to only pay other agents 2%. So she was like, if you're only paying 2%, that's all I'm gonna give you. So she told me she'll honor 3%.
you did luck out on that.
I did, I lucked out a lot. And so guess what though? I had already negotiated 4,500 of sellers, closing costs towards my buyer. So my buyer regardless has 4,500 towards closing costs. So, this is not the first time with the VRC, but this one I lucked out. I didn't have to fight. I didn't have to call anyone or anything, hey, I need to get paid my 3%.
So on the VRC, is it required that there's some documentation somewhere written in agent-to-agent
VRC
notes or something that defines that?
No, VRC is usually used if it's like a short sale, where the short sale lender may say, okay, we'll agree to this lower payoff from the seller, but if we agree to it, the agents are only getting, 2% each instead of 3%. That's kind of why the VRC was started. It was back in the short sale era. So this agent of Nancy's, isn't really even using VRC for the way it's supposed to be used.
Correctly.
VRC was referring to something, excuse me, that could happen after you're in contract that could cause the commission to change, like a short sale.
Mhm.
It's not for a agent to ask, what do you usually get?
Yeah, no,
That's not the proper use of VRC.
No, but I will tell you, a lot of Coldwell Banker agents are, they're basically encouraged to put the VRC, because if at the end of the day, the numbers don't match up and they have to adjust, that protects them.
Yeah,
I was surprised to hear that too.
Yeah, that's not really the proper use for it. Just be cautious if you see VRC. I don't know. I don't think it's too common to see that
Yeah,
check yes. But
that,
if you see it checked yes, I would say the advice would just be have that upfront conversation like you did with the
Yeah.
listing agent.
with them, yeah. I had taken the 2%. I was like, you know what, that's fine regardless. I'm still gonna get the difference from my client. But she opened up that conversation. I was like, all right,
Yeah, you
yeah,
got really lucky on that.
yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of step one of the new system. So I want to make sure you guys know, exactly how to use this, why you need to use it. But again, next week we will work on your value proposition, which is going to enable you to get that buyer to sign this. If you don't have a value proposition, no one's going to want to sign this. Why am I paying you 3%? What are you doing for me? So we'll work on that. We're also going to go over, again, Lori has done this. Lori's the only one in our group who has actually done the newfangled buyer consultation. So she did really well with it. So we're gonna have her kind of go over how she's done hers. And she also did a really nice physical presentation along with it. So, but yeah, so that's next week. So next week's kind of part two of this conversation.
What day next week?
That'll be same time, same place, so it's always, you'll be on vacation, Nancy. Third,
Sweet. I'm leaving on the 13th.
okay, next week's the 11th then,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
these meetings will be every Thursday at 10 a.m.
Okay.
So again, they'll be physical, by Zoom and recorded,
Oh.
so, okay, so, that's on next week's schedule, so, Doug, you had requested this, and I thought it was an excellent idea, that at the end of every weekly meeting, we kind of go around and, anyone that has new listings or new buyers can bring that up, because I've done this in the past, and I've had many occasions where someone sitting over here and someone sitting over here actually has a buyer and a seller, and they can put the deal together almost right at the meeting table. So that's happened actually countless times over the years. So I think it's a great idea. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. And Nancy, you're gonna start.
Oh, with
New,
what?
new listings and buyers.
Oh, gosh. Well, new listing. I am working, I don't have any new listings right now. I'm working on some. So, on that condo, that more like that, Westerville condo, 55 and over, that's coming in March, more likely. I will be having, oh gosh, I wasn't prepared for this. I actually have another one coming in March in the 43229, it's like sailing, on sailing. That might be about 250. The condo, the 55 and over, more likely will be about 249.9. Let's see, I have a buyer looking for on the east side, 43232, 43227, no more than 195,000. 3 bedrooms, preferably 2 bathrooms, but 1.5 would be fine. Split level, probably be ideal for them, or a ranch with a basement. They just need to make an additional bedroom somewhere. But that's all I got.
That's pretty good to start. the year. Yeah. Sam?
I don't really have much. I have one potential investor buyer that I was supposed to meet with Saturday, but he's going out of town, so he's supposed to text me when he wants to meet up again, so hopefully that'll be next weekend, I'm really hoping. But other than that, I don't really have anything going on.
Sam is doing a buyer seminar later this month, which I'm really excited for. That's something that I recommend to everybody, and it used to happen a lot. We used to see a lot of these, and I don't know, since COVID, I don't recall actually seeing any of them, but she's partnering with the lender and
And Rick
inviting
said
people.
she had 3 other people who asked to do them with her, so,
Okay,
yeah.
maybe they're making a comeback, but
Right.
I always thought those were a great way to get, active buyers, pre-approved buyers.
I used to do those, and I used to get back a lot of buyers that way with the homes on the hill,
Okay,
the homes on the hill, so.
Chris, I know you got a lot of stuff.
Yeah, tomorrow I'm gonna be listing Rick's property. And then I have 6 other properties, rental properties in the Hilltop, duplexes, triplexes, 4, whatever, 5 units and an 8-unit apartment building,
And Hilltop?
in the Hilltop area. Yeah, those can be sold separately or, packaged together. So whatever. works
Did you guys
best.
come up with a package price for those?
I think we're gonna start at like 1.75.
Okay.
For all of them together.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, nice to sell them as a package.
How do you know the seller?
My wife and his wife coach volleyball together.
Oh, okay, there you
How
go.
many units we need?
I have a duplex, a triplex. No, maybe not a triplex, maybe it's, a duplex, 4, 5, and 8. There's 6 altogether. I can get you the information.
Okay.
All right, Robe, I know you're brand new,
Okay.
so
Well, since I have 4 potential buyers, that's what I was gonna ask you
that's
about.
awesome. Yes, we'll talk about that afterwards for sure.
Yeah,
And Sam's gonna do the MLS training with you right after this, so you'll know how to do your searches and everything.
exactly, so it's always like, wanted to get it started real quick.
Yeah,
Once I told him like, hey, just, just wait, we're trying to get into it, so it's been almost like, a week. Yeah.
yeah, you're really brand new.
Yeah.
Yeah. But 4 buyers, that's awesome.
Buyers,
Yeah, I've been waiting for you.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, from them,
Okay. So Doug, what do you got? Anything new?
I have a buyer right now, or we've been working with this buyer for a condo in the Upper Arlington area. Really struggling. They want a Reminelli and Hughes type or Bob Webb type property. Up to, I would say 800,000, but just trying to find. They found one, but they weren't ready to move right away. She was heading to Taiwan, so she was going to wait till she comes back. They don't need to be out of their current condo until this summer, so they're motivated, but they're not. They were motivated for the right one. And we got into, they thought it was a little overpriced with the one they did find. So now I have down to the certain neighborhoods that they're looking for and where it is. I'm just trying to hunt for it to pop in the MLS. I'll try to shake the bushes and get some people in there to sell.
And Doug, do you know enough about Lori's buyer to say what she's looking for?
It's a condo. It would be up to, she's approved for up to 300,000, but would like to stay at the 250 mark. 2-bedroom, either 1 or 2 bathrooms, garage in the Westerville area. She works for JP and Jace. She's not over
Trying to sell you
55
her
though.
55 and over condo, but I already know your buyer's not gonna qualify for that age group.
No, she's a little shy at this point. Her parents may, but not her.
All right, Haley, how are you?
Hi, I have 2 buyers looking. Single family. A fence would be nice, but they can always add one. They both want to stay right about 300,000. I work with both of them. So we've just been getting going on looking. The one really wants to be on a bus line, so like anywhere up High Street. Then the other family, they want they're kind of okay with whatever areas, but they'd like to stay like up north 270 belt. So kind of low inventory, but we're looking.
And Julie, like I said, she is not on here. She's listing her condo today, so I actually just looked at it last night. So it is in Glendon, what's that neighborhood called? Glendon Park, I believe it's called. It's off Hamilton Road, between 161 and Morse. 219.9. It's a 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath townhome, 1-car garage, finished basement, and she has a really nice kitchen. Kitchen's totally redone, I think 2 years ago. She's got some pretty high-end appliances in it. I think this will go pretty fast. I helped her with comps this week, and saw it last night and, but that's going, I believe, coming soon today. She may wait till tomorrow, but I think the plan is for today. And then, like Chris mentioned, he's listing a rental property of mine that I'm selling. 3226 Medina Avenue. It's in North Linden, right off Oakland Park Avenue, 43224. It's 199.9. That one, I did a fairly major renovation on it 2 years ago and had to do a little freshening up on it this past few weeks, after the tenant moved out, but it's got a really nice kitchen, updated with granite, nice tile. Bathroom's been updated, all the floors, the wood floor's been refinished. It's got a full basement, does not have a garage. But again, 199.9 in North Linden, and that's coming soon today. So. All right, so yeah, we'll kind of do this format each time. How we do on time, guys?
It's 10:54.
Well, that wasn't too bad. So again, this one's a little longer just because, we kind of had a little backlog of housekeeping stuff and, but future meetings, I think we can keep them to 30 to 45. Next week again might be slightly longer just because the value proposition is pretty significant. We don't want to kind of shortcut on that, so. But recurring wise, over the course of the year, we'll keep these shorter, and I promise I'll never do a meeting just for the sake of doing a meeting. I attend but I attend as many classes and meetings here in the company as I can, so that I'm getting all the, current information to pass on to you guys. I still encourage you guys to attend those things too, but recognizing that, some people have other schedules that they can't physically come into those things. And, for those of you who are like Doug, you're in a lot of these things here at the office. I think it's still good to have discussions about this sort of thing 3, 4, 5 times. With different groups of people, you're gonna get different comments. So I think the more you know, the more you know. So, all right, we'll go ahead and wrap up this meeting. Sam, I think you have to end recording before you close it out to not lose it.
Probably, yeah.
So yeah, Sam's going to put this meeting as well as all the other ones on our YouTube channel. There are also other training videos on there, like a lot of command tips and tricks. So, get in the habit of checking out the YouTube channel too, for that sort of thing. All right, guys. Well, thanks for attending. And if I don't see you before next week, I'll see you next week, same time, same place.
All right, awesome. Cool. So you guys are also
Thanks.
cupped.
Oh, crap. Oh, my God.
So they were kind of wait with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to report.
All right, so